Hi there, happy Monday. So, this week's topic is going to be on self-restraint. The topic of self-restraint, it's quite layered, right? There are several different concepts that I can discuss, but I'm going to list out like 8 core concepts and just give you a quick meaning of it, an example. So the 8 concepts that I have attached to self-restraint is one, it's impulse control, right? And then it's a delayed gratification. It is also self discipline, which is another self care topic that we'll discuss another time. It's emotional regulation. It's also comprised of having moral and ethical boundaries or standards, also social appropriateness, and then willpower. That's a big one. And then also just being mindful and self aware, right? So, impulse control, that first one, is just basically the ability for you to pause, think about your actions or your urges before you just pop off and say something or do something that you may regret later. So, an example, so let's say you get a text message from somebody. Once you see it, you immediately get hot and you want to respond. Instead of responding, for those of you that have watched some of my videos before, pause 5 to 10 seconds. If you need more than that, if you need to take a walk or if you need to just take a break, decompress, you don't have to respond immediately to that person, right? Just respond when you're calm. And then delayed gratification. So essentially, that is resisting short term temptations for the long term goals, right? So let's say there's this pair of shoes. You really want to get the pair of shoes. Let's say they're nearly $1,000 or whatever. And you are saving for a down payment on a condo. So you know in the long run, getting the condo is going to be more rewarding than getting those shoes that you can get later. So that's an example of delayed gratification. All right. And then self-discipline. This is a big one. So it's just consistent effort, all right, to your actions or your behaviors, even when it's difficult to do so, or it may be inconvenient to do so. And then self-discipline is like a long-term habit building, right, over just a momentary desire, right? So let's say I'll use myself an example. I like to write. So if I have a book that I'm writing, I'll dedicate myself to say, hey, I'm going to write 1 page a day, just to at least, go ahead and attack this goal. So that's an example of self-discipline. You stick to something, you do something that you set your mind out to do, right? And then emotional regulation. Emotional regulation is just you being able to manage really intense emotions that you have. So let's say you're angry, you're frustrated, you decide to not act on that anger, that frustration in unhealthy ways, right? That are not going to serve you later, that, in ways that you're not going to be proud of later. So let's say, for an example, you're at work and there's a meeting and one of your coworkers speaks up and says, hey, I have this awesome idea. You know that the idea that they're mentioning is your idea. But instead of you blowing up there at the meeting, make a note of it, jot it down. After the meeting, go to your manager, whomever, and say, hey, that was not their idea. We can call a meeting with all of us there. We can go ahead and get down to all of the details, if you will, but just don't blow up there at the meeting. All right. And then relating your moral and ethical standards, right? So everyone has some stuff that they just won't do. Everyone has some kind of standards. Even though everyone's may be different, everyone has some standards. So choosing to resist those desires and act out of your value system or your belief system, whatever norms that you set for yourself, that is in that core concept of self-restraint. All right. So not going against your moral or ethical standards. So an example of that would be, let's say you're attracted to someone at work, right? I know all of these work examples. You're attracted to someone at work. You know that the person at work is involved with somebody else. Yeah, you're attracted to them, but guess what? You'll be attracted to other people as well. Leave them be. Don't go ahead and act on that, that urge that you have to say, man, they look really nice. You know that they're with somebody, so just leave them be. All right. And then social appropriateness, right? So let's say that's when you recognize that certain behaviors are not suitable, just, as a general like standard or norm, right? So let's say that's saying that there's a time and a place for everything. So given the context of what's going on, you just say, hey, you know what? This is not the place for this. This is not the time. I'm not going to get into that, right? So you restrain yourself. And then an example of that is, let's say you're at a professional, another work event, let's just say, right? And let's say instead of you venting really loudly where everyone can hear you at the event, you don't do that. Take it later to your peeps, to your support system where you can vent and tell them they won't judge you. They'll let you vent all you want. Just go ahead and not do it at that particular venue, right? There's a time and a place for everything. All right. And then willpower. Willpower is big, right? So that is just you using your mental energy or strength to overcome that temptation at the time, right? So not just to go off of habitual responses. So you're going to use that willpower. Let's say you're intermittent fasting or you're on a diet, right? And you know that you have some health goals that you have for yourself. So instead of you going around, eating tons of enchiladas, donuts, whatever the situation may be, you say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and have my lunch that I've already meal prepped, because I want to go ahead and reach those goals. So that would be an example of willpower. And then lastly, being mindful and aware. So that's just being conscious, right? And that requires you to really sit still and pay attention to what's going on rather than just flying off the handle, right? So you are recognizing your thoughts, your feelings, and without immediately reacting, you're being mindful and self-aware in that moment. And you can do it. It's difficult, especially, when some things happen, it's really hard to just compose yourself. I get it, but this is being mindful and aware. So let's say an example of that is you're feeling anxious or overwhelmed about a task that you need to complete, right? Instead of shutting down, you go ahead and acknowledge the situation, you ground yourself, and you tackle it one step at a time until that task is completed. But it requires you to sit there and be still and not just to be, this is where, organization or organizing your thoughts has a big impact on you being mindful and aware. All right. So that's why a lot of times having chaotic thoughts, it can have, chaotic outcomes, so sit there for a moment and think. That's why it's important sometimes to just pause. I know it sounds like a simple thing to do, but it's necessary if you want to make some good choices later. So if this video has resonated with someone about self-restraint, please like the video. If you would like to hear more topics related to self-care, self-love, shifting your mindset to be the best version of yourself, please subscribe to the channel. I would love to see you here. Otherwise, take care, be well, enjoy the rest of your Monday and also the rest of your week.